More than 30 years have passed since Frasier first aired, and the people who created one of the most celebrated comedies in American television history lived through devastating losses, quiet reinventions, addictions, courtroom battles, and journeys almost impossible to reconcile with the polished world they created together on screen. One of them lost his father to a killer's gunfire as a boy, and his younger sister to a monstrous crime years later, and somehow built the longest-running character in modern American television. Another spent his late 30s editing a medical magazine in Chicago before an unexpected phone call from John Malkovich changed his life at almost 40 and made him one of the most beloved fathers America ever had. And a third, a rescue dog considered too wild to keep, received more fan mail at the show's peak than any of his human co-stars. There are recurring characters who quietly become the connective tissue of an entire show. And then there is Noel Shempsky, the nervous, Klingon-speaking, endlessly overlooked KACL sales rep. Hopelessly in love with Roz Doyle and eternally ignored by her, was one of the most beloved supporting figures in the entire 11-season run of Frasier. He was played by Patrick Kerr, a serious, classically trained stage actor who spent decades of his life inhabiting characters most viewers would never realize came from the same performer. He was 37 years old when the series premiered in September of 1993, and his path to Noel was almost entirely accidental. Patrick Kerr was born on January 23, 1956, in Wilmington, Delaware, and grew up in a quiet middle-class household with no visible connection to the entertainment world. Theater found him young. He trained on the American regional stage, the California Shakespeare Theater, Berkeley Rep, Yale Rep, La Jolla Playhouse, where colleagues remembered him as an actor who never seemed to be acting. That kind of restraint is exactly what made Noel, a character who could easily have become an obvious joke, feel instead like a real faintly heartbreaking person the audience genuinely rooted for. He first appeared on Frasier in the show's first season in early 1994 and returned across the next 10 years for 22 episodes, culminating in the series finale in May of 2004. Between his visits to KACL, Kerr built a stage career that Broadway insiders would call one of the most quietly respected of his generation. He earned an Obie Award for his co-starring role in Paul Rudnick's Jeffrey Off-Broadway in 1993, the same year Frasier premiered. He appeared on Broadway in the acclaimed revival of You Can't Take It With You. He toured nationally in the post-pandemic revival of Lerner and Lowe's My Fair Lady from 2019 to 2022. Curb Your Enthusiasm. Audiences knew him as Michael, Larry David's blind pianist friend. Apple TV plus viewers of The Big Door Prize watched him as Mr. Johnson, the small-town grocer. In 2025, he starred in the world premiere of Indian Princesses at La Jolla Playhouse, and in 2026, he appeared at New York's classic stage company in Thornton Wilder's newly completed final play, The Emporium. He is 70 years old today, in 2026, in his fifth decade as a working actor, still moving between the stage and the screen with a quiet, unassuming versatility. He never became a household name. He never wanted to. What he built is arguably more difficult. A career of solid, unshowy craft, and a character in Noel Shempsky who, like everything Patrick Kerr does, sits in your memory long after the applause fades. There are actors, and then there are actors born into the profession itself. Edward Hibbert, the impeccably clipped, over-refined KACL food critic Gil Chesterton, a character whose every syllable seemed to arrive personally engraved on fine china, is one of the latter. He gave Gil an air of English aristocratic exhaustion that had audiences laughing before he even completed a sentence. He was 38 years old when Frasier premiered, and his path to becoming the resident restaurant critic of KACL had begun, in a very real sense, on the day he was born. Edward Hibbert was born on September 9, 1955, in Long Island, New York, but his story is deeply English. His father, Geoffrey Hibbert, was an accomplished British stage and film actor who had made his screen debut in the 1941 wartime drama In Which We Serve, and appeared regularly across British cinema and television through the 1960s. Edward was raised in England, where he attended the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art in London. His father died in Epsom, Surrey, in February of 1969 at only 46 years old. Edward was 13 years old. That loss, more than any classroom, shaped the actor he would become. He returned to the United States in the mid-1980s and quickly established himself as a serious stage presence on both sides of the Atlantic. In 1993, the same year Frasier arrived, Hibbert won an Obie Award for his co-starring role in Jeffrey, the same production that gave Patrick Kerr his own Obie the same season. He appeared on Broadway in The Drowsy Chaperone, in Curtains, which reunited him with his Frasier co-star David Hyde Pierce, in Mrs. Warren's Profession, Something Rotten, and in 2015, again with Pierce, this time as director, in It Should Have Been You. Millions of children who never knew his name knew his voice. He replaced Rowan Atkinson as the voice of the bird Zazu in The Lion King, 2, Simba's Pride, and The Lion King 1.5. In 2024, when the Frasier revival called him back to Seattle to reprise Gil Chesterton, he answered without hesitation. Away from performance, Hibbert has quietly maintained an entirely separate second career. As a New York literary agent, representing writers with the same precise taste he brings to the stage, he turned 70 in September of 2025 and is 70 years old today in 2026. Still working, still commuting between the stage and the page, still, in every meaningful sense, the son of the English actor who taught him the craft. If there was one character on Frasier whose sole purpose was to demolish the pretensions of everyone around him, it was Bulldog Briscoe, the loud, sports-obsessed, gleefully vulgar radio host who parked himself in the KACL bullpen with all the subtlety of a jackhammer. Dan Butler played him with a kind of joyful ferocity that made every scene feel like it was about to break furniture. He was 38 years old at the show's premiere, and the contrast between the man and the character is one of the most striking on this list. Daniel Eugene Butler was born on December 2, 1954 in Huntington, Indiana, and raised in Fort Wayne. His father was a pharmacist, his mother a homemaker, and the family life he grew up in was gentle, ordinary, and completely unremarkable. As a drama student at Indiana University in 1975, he received the prestigious Irene Ryan Acting Scholarship, sponsored by the Kennedy Center. From there, he trained for 2 years at the American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco, one of the most respected classical acting institutions in the country. Colleagues remembered him as thoughtful, intellectually restless, and completely unswaggering, which made the arrival of Bulldog Briscoe on his resume genuinely surreal. The paradox went even further. Butler was openly gay, having come out to his family in his early 20s, at a time and in a place where doing so carried real cost. In 1994, at the exact moment his roaring, chauvinistic character was becoming a fan favorite on NBC, Butler wrote and starred in an autobiographical one-man show called The Only Thing Worse You Could Have Told Me. The title came, reportedly, from a comment his own father made when Butler came out to him. It was a raw off-Broadway piece about being gay in America, in which Butler played 10 different characters trying to understand what gay means. The performance was nominated for the 1995 Drama Desk Award for Outstanding One-Person Show. He had been playing the ultimate straight male caricature all week on the Paramount lot and pouring out his own truth every weekend. One of the most quietly courageous double lives American television has ever seen. Butler appeared in every Frasier season, but one across the show's 11-year run. He also lent his voice for 6 years to Mr. Simmons on the Nickelodeon animated series Hey Arnold, a character notable in retrospect, as one of the first openly gay teachers on American children's television. He returned to reprise Bulldog when the Frasier revival called him back in 2024. Today, Dan Butler is 71 years old. He lives quietly in Vermont with his husband, producer Richard Waterhouse, whom he married on September 12, 2010. He continues to work on stage, most recently on Broadway in the 2018 revival of Tom Stoppard's Travesties, where he played Lennon. He is one of the most quietly principled actors of his generation, and the man behind the loudest character in the whole KCL bullpen. He was not technically a cast member. He did not technically know he was on a television show, but no honest retrospective of Frasier can ignore the wire-haired Jack Russell Terrier who somehow became the biggest star in the ensemble. His name was Moose. He played Eddie, Martin Crane's endlessly patient, blank-faced, chair-hopping companion, and he received, at the show's peak, more fan mail than any of his human co-stars. Moose was born on Christmas Eve of 1990 in Florida, the largest and apparently the most impossible puppy of the litter. His original owners gave him up as unmanageable. He dug holes in the yard, chewed the furniture, climbed trees to escape his enclosure, refused to be house-trained, and reportedly killed a neighbor's cat. He was flown to Los Angeles at 2.5 years old, on a last-chance basis, and landed in the care of the acclaimed movie dog trainer Matilda DeCagny Hallberg. She saw immediately what everyone else had missed: charisma, boundless energy, and a spark of genuine mischief. 6 months of training later, he auditioned for a new NBC sitcom, and, the moment the producer laid eyes on him, the role was his. He was almost 3 years old when Frasier premiered in September of 1993. Everything else you have heard about him is true. Moose graced the covers of Life, TV Guide, and Entertainment Weekly. He was the only member of the Frasier cast to appear on the cover of a national magazine on his own. He had his own autobiography, My Life as a Dog, ghostwritten by David Hyde Pierce's husband, Brian Hargrove. When Kelsey Grammer accepted the 1994 Emmy for Best Actor in a Comedy Series, his closing line was, "Most important, Moose, this is for you." From season 8 onward, as Moose slowed with age, his son Enzo, bred specifically to inherit the role, quietly took over the part. Most viewers never noticed. Moose retired to West Los Angeles in the company of his son and shared the year 2000 feature film My Dog Skip with him, playing the older Skip, while Enzo played the younger version of the same dog. Moose died on June 22, 2006, at the home of his trainer in West Los Angeles, of natural causes at the age of 15 and a half. Enzo followed him almost exactly 4 years later, on June 23, 2010, age 14. Between them, they made a small, brown-eyed, patient-faced dog into one of the most recognizable television personalities of the 1990s. In an ensemble stacked with Emmys, Tonys, and classical training, the biggest star of Frasier was a rescue dog from Florida. She was Frasier Crane's ex-wife, glacial, hyper-articulate, and one of the most memorable comic characters of the 1980s and 1990s. Bebe Neuwirth appeared only intermittently on Frasier, but every single appearance felt like a small event. She was 34 years old when the show premiered, and by that point, she had already turned down what was, on paper, one of the safest television careers in America, because the theater was calling her louder. Beatrice Bebe Neuwirth was born on December 31, 1958, in Princeton, New Jersey, the daughter of Sidney Ann Neuwirth, a painter, and Lee Paul Neuwirth, a mathematician. She began ballet training at the age of 5 and never really stopped. After training at Juilliard, she went straight to Broadway in A Chorus Line, and in the ensuing decade, built one of the most celebrated musical theater resumes of her generation. She won her first Tony Award for Best Featured Actress in a Musical for her performance as Nikki in the 1986 revival of Bob Fosse's Sweet Charity. Her second Tony, and this time for Best Actress in a Musical, followed for her scorching Velma Kelly in the 1996 revival of Chicago. She remains the only actress to have played all 3 lead female roles in that production: Velma Kelly, Roxy Hart, and matron Mama Morton. While all of that was unfolding, she was also a 2-time Emmy winner as Dr. Lilith Sternin. She had introduced the character on Cheers in the show's 4th season in 1986, and her chemistry with Kelsey Grammer's Frasier became one of the great sitcom pairings of the decade. When Frasier launched in 1993, she was offered the same role again, permanently, on the spin-off. She turned it down. Broadway was her first love, and she was not willing to trade it for a full-time Los Angeles sitcom. She agreed instead to appear only as an occasional guest star, and she did so throughout the show's entire 11-year run, and later reprised Lilith in the 2023 revival on Paramount Plus in the episode Freddy's Birthday. Bebe Neuwirth turned 67 on December the 31st, 2025, and is 67 years old today, in 2026. She earned a 3rd Tony nomination in 2024 for her performance as Fraulein Schneider in the acclaimed Kit Kat Club revival of Cabaret. Silver-haired, still fiercely elegant, and still, by every account of every collaborator, one of the most professional performers on any stage she walks onto. She chose the harder road decades ago. It has paid off in a career of almost intimidating range. She was the sharp, warm, unmistakable heartbeat of KACL, Frasier's producer, his closest confidant, and the person who kept the show emotionally grounded season after season. Peri Gilpin played Roz Doyle across every one of the show's 264 episodes. She was 32 years old at the premiere in September of 1993, and behind her arrival on that show was a story of loss, luck, and a role that, by rights, should have gone to someone else entirely. Peri Gilpin was born Peri K. Oldham on May 27, 1961, in Waco, Texas, later taking her stepfather's surname when her mother remarried in 1969. She was raised in Dallas, studied at the Dallas Theater Center, and continued her training at the University of Texas at Austin and the British American Academy in London. Her biological father, Jim O'Brien, was a legendary Philadelphia news personality, a weatherman and reporter beloved on ABC's Channel 6, WPVI. On September 25, 1983, when Peri was only 22 years old, her father died in a skydiving accident. That loss shaped her in ways she has spoken about only sparingly across the decades. Roz Doyle almost wasn't hers. When the producers cast the role for the Frasier pilot, the part first went to Lisa Kudrow, who was replaced before filming actually began. Gilpin, one of over 300 actresses who had auditioned, got the second chance. The character was named as a tribute to a real Roz Doyle, a producer on the sitcom Wings, created by the same team behind Frasier, who had died of breast cancer in 1991. Across the show's entire run, Gilpin was the only one of the 5 principal cast members never once nominated for an Emmy Award. She won a Screen Actors Guild Ensemble Award with the rest of the cast in 1999, and, in the same understated way she inhabited Roz, kept doing her work. Life brought her other losses. Her stepbrother, Mark Gilpin, a former child actor who had played Michael Brody opposite Roy Scheider in Jaws 2 in 1978, died in Dallas on July 29, 2023, at 56. In her professional life, Gilpin appeared in Make It or Break It on ABC Family, took a recurring role on Scorpion, and returned as Roz in the Frasier reboot on Paramount, plus from 2023 to 2024. A homecoming she has called her most cherished. She married the realist painter Christian Vincent in 1999, and they have 2 daughters, Stella and Ava. In 2025, she and Ava together joined the producing team of Joe, the Little Women musical. Peri Gilpin turned 65 on May 27, 2026, and is 65 years old today. Still working, still radiantly at home, on stage and on camera, the last woman standing from the original KACL bullpen. She was the reason a repressed psychiatrist obsessed with his housekeeper became one of television's great love stories. Jane Leeves, as Daphne Moon, the Mancunian physical therapist, sometimes psychic, and eventually Mrs. Niles Crane brought a warmth to the show that anchored every relationship in it. She was 32 years old at the premiere, and her journey to America and to the Cranes' Seattle apartment was longer than her sunny presence ever suggested. Jane Elizabeth Leeves was born on April 18, 1961, in Ilford, Essex, England, and grew up in East Grinstead, nowhere near Manchester, whose accent she would have to fake for 11 straight years to considerable British commentary. She trained at the Bush Davies School of Dance as a young ballet dancer, worked as a model, and drifted into acting almost by accident. Her first screen appearance was as an angel, literally, in Monty Python's The Meaning of Life in 1983. She spent several years as one of Hill's Angels on The Benny Hill Show. She appeared memorably in 3 episodes of Seinfeld as Marla the Virgin, including the classic The Contest. She had a recurring role on Murphy Brown, and then, in 1993, she got Daphne. And everything changed. Off-screen, her connection to the Frasier ensemble ran unusually deep. Peri Gilpin, David Hyde Pierce, and John Mahoney all became godparents to her children. She married the television producer Marshall Coben in 1996, and they had 2 children, son Finn William, born in 1997, and daughter Isabella Catherine, born in 2000. When Leeves became pregnant during the 8th season of Frasier, the writers famously reworked entire storylines around her. Daphne's weight gain became a season-long plot, a wry inside joke between the show and its viewers. After Frasier, Leeves stayed steadily busy. She played Joy Scroggs on TV Land's Hot in Cleveland alongside Betty White, Valerie Bertinelli, and Wendy Malick from 2010 to 2015. She played Dr. Kit Voss on Fox's medical drama The Resident for 6 seasons, from 2018 through 2023. She returned to the world of Daphne in a limited way for the 2023 revival. Today, in 2026, Jane Leeves is 65 years old. She lives with Marshall Coben in Malibu, California, in the long, uninterrupted marriage that has now spanned 3 decades. The girl from East Grinstead who once played an angel with a fake wing found her wings in Seattle in a Mancunian accent she had to invent from scratch, and never entirely put down. He was Martin Crane, retired Seattle police officer, disabled by a bullet to the hip, marooned in his son's ludicrous designer apartment with his battered old easy chair and a Jack Russell Terrier who stared too much. And John Mahoney inhabited that character with such perfect, unaffected humanity that most American viewers assumed he was exactly what he appeared to be. A working-class Midwesterner who had grown up in the shadow of the railway tracks. He was, in fact, nothing of the kind. He was 53 years old when Frasier began, and the life he had lived to that point was almost novelistic in its improbability. John Mahoney was born Charles John Mahoney on June 20th, 1940, in Blackpool, Lancashire, England. His pregnant mother, Margaret, had been evacuated there from the family home in Manchester to escape the Nazi bombing raids of the Blitz. He was the 7th of 8 children. His father, Reg, was a baker who played classical piano at home. As a small boy in wartime Britain, he later said, England felt bleak and dark. In March of 1959, at 18 years old, he took a boat to America to visit his older sister Vera, a war bride who had married an American serviceman. He never went back. He earned his U.S. citizenship in 1971 by serving 3 years in the United States Army, a decision he credited with completely erasing his British accent. He earned a master's degree in English at Quincy University, then taught English at Western Illinois University in the early 1970s. Throughout his 30s, he worked as an editor at a medical magazine in Chicago. He was almost 40 years old. He had never professionally acted. He was, by any reasonable measure, not going to become a movie star. Everything changed in 1977. He was 37 years old and taking classes at the St. Nicholas Theater in Chicago. There, he met a young John Malkovich, who invited him to become one of the newest ensemble members of a scrappy new company called Steppenwolf. He would join the Steppenwolf ensemble officially in 1979 and remain a member for the next 39 years, until his death. He won a Tony Award in 1986 for Best Featured Actor in a Play for his performance in John Guare's The House of Blue Leaves. He appeared in Moonstruck, Say Anything, 8 Men Out, Barton Fink, The American President. And in 1993, he auditioned to play Kelsey Grammer's father and became the beating, blue-collar heart of the show, around which everyone else could safely orbit. Off-camera, Mahoney was a devoted Steppenwolf man to the end. He never married. He moved back to Illinois in 2003 after Frasier wound down, and returned to the Chicago stage he never really considered leaving. He appeared as Betty White's love interest on Hot in Cleveland from 2011 through 2014. In late 2017, he was diagnosed with throat cancer. On February 4th, 2018, John Mahoney died in hospice care in Chicago at 77 years old. Kelsey Grammer wrote a single line in tribute, "He was my father. I loved him." Everyone else who worked with him said something almost identical. The English professor who turned actor at 37 had given the world a father figure so complete, so warm, so real, that millions of viewers still miss him. He was Niles Crane, Frasier's fussier, younger, endlessly in love brother, ferociously fastidious, hopelessly infatuated with Daphne Moon, forever competing with his own sibling for the last word. Niles was, for many viewers, the funniest single person on the show. David Hyde Pierce embodied him with a physical precision, a delicate comic timing, and a warmth that made a walking bundle of neuroses somehow entirely lovable. He was 34 years old when the series premiered, and his journey to the role of the Second Doctor, Crane, had begun in a small city in upstate New York. David Pierce was born on April 3, 1959, in Saratoga Springs, New York, the youngest of 4 children. His father, George Hyde Pierce, was an insurance agent who had also been an aspiring actor. His mother, Laura Marie, was a homemaker. Music came first. David played piano and organ, and as a boy, he regularly played the organ at Bethesda Episcopal Church in Saratoga Springs. He attended Yale University, initially planning a career in classical music, and gradually drifted toward acting through the university's theater program. In 1982, he made his Broadway debut in Christopher Durang's Beyond Therapy. He was a working New York stage actor when the Frasier audition came his way. Pierce won the Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Supporting Actor in a comedy series 4 times across the show's run, a record for that category. But the personal weight he carried across those years was heavy. His father, George, died of Alzheimer's disease. His grandfather died of Alzheimer's disease before that. His mother and grandmother, both primary caregivers, died shortly after them. Pierce channeled that inheritance into decades of visible activism. He served on the National Board of the Alzheimer's Association, testified before the United States Senate, and famously spent 3 weeks of every month during the Frasier years filming, and the 4th week working on advocacy. In 2010, he was awarded the special Isabel Stevenson Tony Award for his humanitarian service to that cause. His professional life kept expanding. He won a Tony Award for Best Actor in a Musical in 2007 for Curtains, opposite his old Frasier colleague Edward Hibbert. He earned a Tony nomination for his work opposite Bette Midler in Hello, Dolly in 2017, and another for Vanya and Sonia and Masha and Spike. He appeared as Paul Child, husband of Julia Child, in the acclaimed HBO Max series Julia from 2022 to 2023. When the Frasier revival came calling, he politely turned it down. His stage, film, and voice work were pulling him elsewhere, and he was, in his own words, just too full to give up any of them. In private life, he married television writer Brian Hargrove on October 24, 2008 in California. After 26 years together, and just before Proposition 8 banned same-sex marriages in that state. Today, in 2026, David Hyde Pierce is 67 years old, still one of Broadway's most quietly essential presences, still the public face of the fight against the disease that took his father, and still, in every serious sense, one of the finest character actors of his generation. And finally, him, the man without whom none of this would exist. Kelsey Grammer has now inhabited Dr. Frasier Crane across 3 separate series and more than 40 years of American television, the longest run of any actor in a single scripted role in the history of the medium. He was 38 years old when Frasier premiered in September of 1993, and behind him lay a life that reads, still, like something no scriptwriter would dare invent. Alan Kelsey Grammer was born on February 21, 1955, on the island of St. Thomas in the United States Virgin Islands. His parents divorced when he was 2 years old. He was raised largely by his mother, Sally, and his beloved maternal grandfather, Gordon, in New Jersey and Florida. Gordon died of cancer while Kelsey was still a boy. 2 years later, on April 24, 1968, his biological father, Frank Allen Grammer Jr., was shot to death outside his home in the Virgin Islands by a deranged neighbor who first set a ring of fire around the house to lure him outside. Kelsey was 13 years old. He barely knew the man he had lost. 7 years after that, on July 1, 1975, his 18-year-old sister Karen was kidnapped after her shift at a Red Lobster in Colorado Springs, raped and murdered by a man named Freddie Lee Glenn. Kelsey was 20 years old and studying at the Juilliard School in Manhattan when police officers came to his door with the news. 5 years after that, in June of 1980, his 2 half-brothers, Stephen and Billy Grammer, drowned in a scuba diving accident in the Virgin Islands. Billy did not resurface. Stephen dived after him and suffered a fatal embolism trying to save him. Billy's body was never recovered. That is the world Kelsey Grammer carried into every audition room. He was later dismissed from Juilliard. He fought alcohol and cocaine addiction for years, a struggle he has spoken about with unusual honesty in the decades since. He was arrested more than once. He nearly lost everything. And then, in the fall of 1984, he was cast in a small guest role on a Boston-set sitcom about a bar called Cheers. That role was Dr. Frasier Crane. He was supposed to appear in only a handful of episodes. He stayed for 9 seasons, and then, when Cheers ended in 1993, was given his own show. He would win the Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Comedy Series 3 times for Frasier, in 1994, 1995, and 1998, alongside Golden Globes, Screen Actors Guild Awards, and every other honor a television actor can realistically win. In private life, Grammer has been married 4 times, most recently to Kate Walsh in 2011. He has 8 children spread across those marriages, including the actresses Spencer Grammer and Greer Grammer. In July of 2020, his eldest daughter Spencer was slashed by a knife-wielding attacker in a New York restaurant while trying to help another patron, an incident that shook him deeply. On May 6, 2025, he published a New York Times best-selling memoir about his sister, Karen, A Brother Remembers, a devastating, tender book 50 years in the making. In 2023, he brought Frasier Crane back for a Paramount Plus revival that ran for 2 seasons and closed in 2024. In April of 2026, he was named one of the Library of American Broadcasting Foundation's Giants of Broadcasting and Electronic Arts. In June of 2026, he joined the cast of the dog rescue drama Ethan Almighty. He is currently at work on Marvel's Avengers Doomsday, reprising his role as Dr. Hank McCoy, the Beast. Kelsey Grammer is 71 years old today, in 2026. He is still working. He is still, by every measure that matters, the last man standing from the show he built. There it is, an entire world that existed just behind the cameras of Frasier, loss and reinvention, comedy and grief, addiction and recovery, and one of the deepest, longest-lasting bonds between an ensemble of actors that American television has ever produced. Some of them lived through public tragedies no viewer could see coming. One of them died before the show became myth. Another kept building quietly for decades after it ended. And one of them was a small brown and white dog rescued from a family that could not handle him. But every one of them contributed to a story that 11 seasons and 264 episodes could not fully contain, and that a Paramount Plus revival tried, 30 years later, to keep alive. Tell us in the comments, which of these actors was your personal favorite? Whose performance meant the most to you across those 11 seasons? And where in the world are you watching from today? If you love finding the real stories behind the classic shows and the people who created them, subscribe to this channel and ring the bell. Every week, we go past the character and into the life.